All right. What is going on, everybody? This is eRoo with Investor Central Club and STAX. It is Wednesday, November 26th at about 12:30 p.m. on the West Coast Pacific Time. And we've got some STAX flow to talk about. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, so keep in mind markets will be closed tomorrow. And Friday is a short half day. Markets will only be open till about 1 p.m. on the Eastern time, and which is basically 10 o'clock here on the West Coast. Quick little share. I've got Jane here, which is one of our cat fosters. My wife and I foster cats for Love Your Feral Felines over here in San Diego, and this little sweet girl was over at the cat rescue and was getting a little sick, so she's back here back here at our house for a little bit to get better before she heads back. But she's been kind of clingy, continues to come seeking affection all day, so you might see her in the shot here and there. All right, let's go into it. We've got our STAX flow on the screen, as you guys can see over here. I always like to start off by taking a quick peek over at SPY. SPY, it looks like a lot of calls. Like, we made a pretty decent run up today. We're back at about 680, 681 in terms of the spot price. And you can see there's a little bit of puts being taken, but again, it's starting to look a little bit, they're getting out of stuff. So, especially with today being, or this week being a shortened week, a lot of people are going to avoid holding on to stuff over the weekend. So, or not over the weekend, over Thanksgiving. And because Friday is a short day, you can expect that it's going to be a low volume type of thing. So, a lot of calls sold off. Puts were dominating for a while it was hitting those highs, but it really, price hasn't moved away from that too much. I do think that will come back down to about 679 or so, probably experience a little bit of max pain for today when it comes down to the indices with SPY. In other news this week with our flow scanner, you can see, compared to some of the previous weeks where we saw big drawdowns and big, big price volatility and big movements, SPY 110 million puts to about 31 million calls. NVIDIA a bit more bullish. IWM fairly bearish. QQQ leaning toward the bearish side. Of course, we had our news this week with Google, where Google's TPU units are being favored over with Meta potentially looking into getting a lot of those from Google. Tesla 44 mil to 26 mil. AMD slightly bearish. IBIT seeing a little bit of bullish flow. Meta more bullish than bearish. And then gold, GLD, 20 mil to about 600K inputs. So, this week, I wouldn't use this week too much to gauge the sentiment. Again, like I said, it's a fairly shortened week, so that you can expect that ultimately not too many decisions are going to be made. We go into December as well next week, so keep that in mind. Final month of the year. People are expecting a bit of a Santa rally. We'll pull up the charts in a little bit so that you guys can see. It does look like that there is a good possibility we could see higher going into next month. So what was the big narrative this last week, or actually last 2 weeks? Okay. Over here, what I've got is the CME FedWatch tool. This is basically showing you guys what the target rate probabilities for the December 10th Fed meeting are. And you can see right now our possibility of a rate cut have actually gone back up close to 85%. This has been hovering between 84-85%. When I just refreshed it before I went live, that's where it dropped to 82. The idea here is that ultimately the rate cut about 2 weeks ago was basically a 94%. It was basically a lock. Then we had some bad jobs data, and ultimately there was a bit of fear that they weren't going to cut. So this probability actually dropped down to about 40%, and that's why we saw a huge pullback on SPY over the course of the last few weeks. Then just earlier, just last week and this week, we started to see this probability rise coming back. A lot of the Fed members have been discussing about how there might even be a potential 50 basis point cut, and that unemployment and dealing with the unemployment is a bigger factor and a bigger concern. It's more of a priority right now compared to what's happening with, potentially happening with inflation. The idea is if we cut too fast too soon, we'll bring inflation back on the table. But if we don't do something to stimulate the economy, unemployment could continue to get worse and worse. And that there's a lot of economists right now showing and saying that, hey, we're basically stuck in stagflation. High unemployment, high interest rates or high inflation, and we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. But the idea right now is that inflation, actually, at least the numbers that are being reported, are under 3%. They're like 2.6, 2.7, at least are the last few numbers that we've seen. So, some could argue we're not exactly in stagflation. I would say we are experiencing a bit of it. And the 25 basis point cut is kind of expected at this point. So we'll see what ends up happening as we get closer and closer to that Fed meeting. With that being said, let's take a look over at our charts, especially for SPY. I had this charted in our Discord just yesterday. My expectation for yesterday was the fact that we were going to make our way up toward this upper bound that I have drawn and test around a little bit, before we do head up higher. Looks like the price movements today were a bit stronger than I'd expected. We broke right above this upper bound that I've drawn. But you can see we tested the lower range over here, bounced up higher, tested the downtrend a little bit, went higher and higher, and actually broke up. So there's a good possibility we could still see higher. I think this is, I've been saying with the way that these markets are moving lately is they're very heavily headline based. So depending on what we see in terms of the news, if the president decides to tweet something, all of a sudden markets are going to react based upon that. Okay. It does look fairly strong right here, but I will say that as of right now, with us coming close to today's the close of the markets today, I wouldn't be surprised to see this drop $1 or $2, come back toward about 679, stay right under 680, because that's where a lot of open interest happens to be for today's contracts. In addition, this is actually for bulls, this is a great sign. Our VIX has dropped pretty significantly. We didn't end up seeing a higher pop over here, and we've now broken down below this wedge that we've originally had. We're now down to about 16 to 17 in terms of the VIX. So if we see it coming further back down, that could be, set us up and get us ready for that Santa rally that people keep talking about. If this VIX is able to stay down between 15 to 17 for the next 2 weeks or so, I definitely think we could see a big rally going into the end of the year. Bitcoin has now rallied back up almost at 90K. It did peak up above 90K for a moment, still right below it. Good sign for crypto enthusiasts and a great sign for MicroStrategy and Tom Lee with Bitmine immersion. But I don't think we're out of the clear just yet. The poly market says there's like a 45% chance that we can see back above 100K before the end of the year. But as of right now, there's still a bit of a question mark. Do we really have such a risk off, scenario where people can start putting money back into Bitcoin and back into crypto markets? big thing and the big news right now is just that quantitative tightening, right? The Fed was tightening up their balance sheet, and so quantitative tightening was basically taking money out of the liquidity out of the markets, taking money out, and so that's why we saw, a lot of a little bit more struggle, and you've been hearing a little bit about liquidity struggling with the markets, with banks and things like that. But quantitative tightening ends on December 1st. It doesn't mean that the money printers are turned on right away, but it does set us up for the possibility of that happening in the next few months. It is very possible that that's going to start to happen in full force starting in 2026. But usually something's going to happen in terms of a bigger news type of event that possibly causes a little bit of issue, but ultimately the Fed comes to the rescue and starts to print money and causes asset prices to start to go up. Google had a huge pump the other day with its news with Meta. It's kind of made this ABC pattern back down. We'll see if in the next week or so we start to see this moving up again. But it, very possibly. If not, we could see it come back down toward about 300 to retest before potentially heading higher. The volume, I would say the volume today and the volume on Friday, you can expect those to be fairly low. So, it won't be till Monday till it really makes a decision as to what direction it might go. Apple seems pretty strong. There has been quite a bit of flow showing Apple lately too. So I will say that, keep an eye out for that. I will pull it up in STAX in a moment as well to show you guys. Amazon breaking back up close to that channel. We'll see if it starts to come back in. My lower end prediction of this, I missed it by one price target, but ultimately came down, bounced around, and went back up toward the levels. Microsoft saw a little bit of a sell-off after what happened with the news basically the news with Google is the fact that if Google TPUs can be used as an alternative to NVIDIA's GPUs, it starts to devalue NVIDIA's GPUs little by little. It's not going to make an overnight dive in terms of pricing, but it does mean that as there's more competition in these markets, we will start to see, the margins for NVIDIA and the pricing for their GPUs start to come down just a little bit. But Microsoft now back up at the top end of where I see this downtrend that we're in. So we'll see if we reject from that or if we start to break back up higher. NVIDIA starting to make a little bit of a recovery after all that as well. We did see a drop after the news, but it's getting bought up pretty heavily. So we've headed back up toward this point of control. We've bounced off of it a little bit. So we'll see if this will hold or if we start to chop around in this range for a bit. Tesla doing fairly well, staying pretty strong. It does need to break up above this 430 range or so to have a little bit more movement up to the upside. Netflix, I still have Netflix's target for about 100 right here. I think we could head down here before we start to see a bounce back up to the upper range. This, it still hasn't broken out of this chop range so far between 103 and 107. So. The Alibaba, we saw the White House release a press release about how some of these Chinese companies are set up in order to not only spy on Americans but take our information and things like that. And so I think there's gonna be a bit of a campaign being used to try to drive the prices of some of these companies down. So I would be careful. Right now with Chinese names, it's going to cause two things. It's going to cause this trade war that we're in eventually might push some of these down, but I would say it would be pretty good buying opportunities. China's set themselves up for a strong decade ahead. And ultimately, if it brings this back down into some viable levels, I'm sure we'll start to see volume start to come back in. And my prediction as well is that probably in January, we'll probably start to hear some whispers about, China adding some stimulus to their economy, and that eventually will probably boost Alibaba back up toward that $200 price and possibly higher. All right, let's jump into STAX real quick. I noticed there's not too many people watching, so we can keep this nice and short. I'm just gonna go over some quick things and talk a little bit about what's coming up with earnings too. A little bit more puts than calls for SPY. Tesla strong, Nvidia strong, Bitcoin, IBIT looking strong. Palantir getting some love too. Robinhood here, 6 mil to about a mil. MicroStrategy finally getting some love. And yeah, that's probably it for now. Okay. Yesterday, I noticed some unusual riot calls that came in over here near the market close. We already saw this. This is up now over 15. Saw a little bit of a movement. We're ready for that. So, riot, big money, and unusual, as you can see. Right. Broadcom. Oh, so this was actually, we have a couple of these. I believe that's a STAX AI print today. There we go. Broadcom is set up to do pretty well. All right. They are a part of that semiconductor chip ecosystem and are essential to the production of not only Google's TPUs, but also to NVIDIA's chips as well. So this is a pretty big expected move. 25% by March, $500 strike, $2.66 million spent over here. 1.6K per contract, while they're sitting right below $400 right. So I would say that's a decent pick for if you think that we're going to start to, markets are starting to pump, especially with next year, that this, AI hype train is not over yet. I would say Broadcom's a really good one to consider. Okay. Next. Wanted to pull this up for you guys today. Earnings. We've got some earnings coming up. Okay. Next week with earnings, we got Monday after close, MongoDB, MDB. On Tuesday after close, Marvel, GitLab, CrowdStrike, American Eagle Outfitters, OKTA. Wednesday, Dollar Tree, Macy's, Salesforce at the close, Snowflake, and then C3 AI. Thursday, Kroger, Dollar General, Hormel Foods, Build-A-Bear. Interesting take. Build-A-Bear is actually one of the biggest winners if in terms of percentages since like the 90s or so. Build-A-Bears continued to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and their share price reflects it pretty well. TD Bank, Rubrik, DocuSign, ChargePoint, and Ulta Beauty, and then Victoria's Secret. I did see something talking about how we have potentially seen the bottom of consumer sentiment, and in most cases we could start to see it start to reverse up. So retailers and clothing companies, things like that, we could see a big pump and start to see, we're starting to see, consumers coming back to the markets with those. This cat is trying to get in on everything right here. I know there's only a few of you guys watching. If you guys are here, go ahead, say hi in the chat. I haven't seen anybody say anything yet. Check. There's a shooting a block from the White House, so down. Oh, I did not know that. That's breaking news. Saw also today apparently Amazon Web Services AWS went down for an hour or so, but STAX wasn't affected this time, which was nice. There's been a lot of silver, a lot of gold. Starting to see Ethereum, ETFs coming in as well. So consider some of those, like Mara as well. Some of the miners. I think if we're going based upon cycles, the Bitcoin cycle still could have some room down to go, but I mean, right now it was like Tom Lee is predicting that Bitcoin's going to 200K and that Ethereum can go to 7K. So I don't know. Some of those, obviously, some of those analysts have a lot more resources than we do. They know more of what's going behind closed doors than we do as well. So I mean, take it for what you will, right? If you have any tickers you guys want me to look over, go ahead, let me know. I'm just gonna pull up a few things here just to see what WaveX looks like today. Nvidia, a lot of calls. So the theme I'm gonna point out today is you'll probably see a lot of these green lines and also, a few of these red ones start to dip below zero. The idea is that right now most people are probably not gonna want to hold on to too much going into the holidays. Oh, Tesla's looking solid right here. Tesla could be primed for another pump by next week. I'm gonna screenshot a few of these, drop into my chat as well. Microsoft, not bad. I want to hear your guys' thoughts too. Do you think there is an AI bubble, and do you think it's gonna pop soon? Ooh, Amazon looking bearish here. Oh, that's an interesting. There's no AI bubble because it already popped. As I listen more and my goal here is always to try to see and try to listen to what people that are smarter than me, people that are more experienced than me, try to see what they have to say about it. And I say a part of the AI bubble is already popped. What that means is that if you take a look at a lot of, pull this up here. If you take a look over at IonQ, QBTS, these are already showing that a part of this has already popped. Okay. A lot of money did flow into these, data center type plays. You see IonQ, core weave. Okay. They have that market cycle look to it, and they're now at a range where you might want to start considering building a long-term position in some. Okay. Yep. SOUN. I mean, Soundhound's actually not even that bad in terms of overall, but yeah, it's didn't quite go as high as it could have. Didn't retest these previous highs from 2024. This is a very short cycle if you consider it. But yeah, from the tops to most recent tops to where we're at, a lot of these names are down 40 to 50%. Okay. Yeah, I think these names are getting ready to potentially pump. I don't think it's going to happen, 2026, maybe mid 2026. I would say maybe 2027 or so is more likely. There's so much invested in the AI race at this point that I don't think the US can afford to stop pouring money into it. The one that I feel is the biggest concern at this point is just OpenAI. OpenAI is really stuck in a very, very precarious spot because they have a lot of spend commitments. The number going around is they have 1.3 to 1.4 billion dollars that they're committed to spending over the course of the next 5 years. But they make what, 13-14 billion dollars a year right now. So they have to figure out how to make that money. Now with Google getting into this chip race as well, it starts to, the GPUs that OpenAI is getting from NVIDIA, like I said, if these TPU units that Google, is going to be producing can offer a similar or a alternative to those GPUs, it's going to, it's basically going to limit the monopoly that NVIDIA's built so far when it comes down to people having to purchase their GPUs for AI use. If that happens, it's going to devalue it, and ultimately it's going to put a dent into OpenAI and their bottom line, because they're very much valuing the price of those GPUs very highly at this point. So OpenAI is expected to potentially go public next year or the year after, and they need to figure out a way to raise money so that they can actually spend the 1.4 trillion. They need money, so they're going to be looking for investors to try to help them out with that situation. Yeah, let me do that real quick. I'm going to say Oracle as well. I mean, dude, look at Oracle. This is a sign that something's gone wrong with the AI trade. They had this pop, right? They went up 40, almost 50% off their earnings, and they've come down almost 45%. They're sitting at about 40%. Right? These levels that I expected for it to hold did not even hold. Gone down further. So I'd be careful with Oracle right now. We're trying to suck money out of this one. Yeah, this is what Oracle's WaveX looks like. There are a lot of puts, but that just dropped now below, but it's sitting at like 4 mil, which is nothing for a name like this. There are some calls being bought right at the money for not only Friday but next year. But nothing in it says like, oh, it's a lock in terms of what direction it's headed. Right now. I think Tesla's looking a bit bullish for next week, or at least through yeah, probably going through next week. A couple of these are for Friday, but they're all at the money. TSM sold off a little bit with the news about Google, but TSM's the company that produces for them. There is an expectation, I would say, that there, a little bit on the rumor mill is the fact that there's a possibility we might see some sort of deal done between Intel and Google and Meta if they're going to be producing those units. And so if Intel's able to get in on that, it's definitely going to boost Intel's share price. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Intel above 40 if that's the case, if this rumor does become true. But right now, yeah, WaveX doesn't necessarily reflect that just yet. I don't think. I think that might be a little bit later down the line. TSM. Yeah, TSM. I'd like to see more flow, but it definitely is more bullish than bearish. Puts kind of shot up at the end of the day. Some big money expecting it to drop a little bit more though. I bounced right off of that level you said. Quick. The thing with when I stream live here, gotta switch screens manually. Yep, bounced right off of where I said, came right back down. Right under 680. Where to close? Yeah, 679.70. So a little bit of the way I think when it comes down to this. So because markets are closed tomorrow, usually this would be something that happens more so on like a Friday, and especially more so on days where you have multiple expirations or multiple contract expirations. So basically if like let's say the weekly, the monthly, the quarterly or yearly contracts of any sort of options trades, there are certain days where you have like triple or quad witching. Those are the ones where you can notice not only the open interest is extremely high, you got a lot of contracts still out there, but it's just basically that, people flood to those contracts because there's more liquidity in it. There's this thing called maximum pain, and it's basically understanding that behind every options market, there's actually a market maker. There's somebody who has the incentive to try to keep prices at a certain range or a certain below or above a certain level in order to profit or maximize their profits. Now you can expect, especially with today, we're hovering right around 680. 680 being a nice round number. Multiples of 5, multiples of 10, you can understand, and then especially when they're close to the hundreds, so like you could say 700, 600, 500. Well, when SPY is very close to those numbers, you can look over at the options chain, and you can notice that a lot of people group themselves around those round numbers in terms of the open interest. A lot more contracts exist right there. So you can say, okay, well, I'm assuming today with SPY, we probably had a lot of open interest at 680. People expecting it to be above 680, and as long as it stays above 680, those contracts have value. Well, the market maker is on the other side of these, and they've sold you these contracts. They want them to go to zero as much as possible, especially the biggest number of open interest contracts. So 680 being one of those, right? Ultimately, they have an incentive to push the price right below it by closing. So you see 679, 679.70. even if price was at 679.99, those contracts would be worth zero, right? So maximum pain is just the concept that price is sometimes going to be manipulated toward a specific number or under a specific number in order for the market maker to be the beneficiary, to be the one that profits the most as much as possible. So if all those contracts go to zero, they scare people out of it early, etc. Um, it's money in their pocket. They make trillions of dollars off this kind of stuff. Okay, so not surprised to see 679.70, and then right after hours, you see it pump right back up above 680. So very, very interesting to compare. IREN fell a lot too. I will say for a lot of these AI names that pumped and came right back down, consider where you would set and where you would consider buying more of it. So like right now, where it's at, probably get some. If it comes lower than where it was, consider getting into it. Do a little research into the company, see if they, number one, are going to make money or are set to make money. And ultimately, this could be a long-term play where it could actually play out pretty nicely for you. Keep that in mind. Yeah, maximum pain is a real thing for the markets, and you have to understand, especially with derivatives and things like that we trade options. They are based upon, there's just so much money flowing in these markets that there's going to be manipulation behind the scenes. Like, who are you gonna go and blame for it at this point, right? So keep an eye on Bitcoin over this weekend. I've generally found for like holidays, I mean, it is one of the things where like, especially when Bitcoin and crypto is in a bull market during the holidays, you can expect that that's where we start to um, start to tell grandma about it. You start to tell everybody in your family about crypto, and it brings the public into the space, and it starts to, those people end up being used as liquidity. So I would be careful. Like right now, Bitcoin's not doing too great, so it's probably not going to be a hot topic around the dinner table. But at least I would say next year is where I predict that we might see a bottom for the crypto markets, and then a possible big pump from there. Yeah, consider the dinner table conversations. Obviously, for some families, you want to avoid politics. So talk about the stock market instead. Right? Um, but I mean, going into 2026, my expected, like, I always want to try to think of it from the politician's point of view. What do they want going into next year? Well, next year are the midterms, and so if that's the case, they politicians want to maintain their positions. If the market goes to crap during that year, there's going to be a lot of backlash, and people are less likely to keep their positions. So we should probably see something to appease the public, or at least keep the public off their backs in that sense, right? So we'll see what happens. My expectation, like I said earlier, I expect that we will see some money printing starting next year. I don't think that it's necessarily going to start in December, but the quantitative tightening has ended. So ultimately, we could start to see some more money flow back in. One quick thing, by the way, these two big red candles that marked basically this double bottom that we've seen, there is a risk that we could see another drop back down. If for some reason we decide we're not going to cut rates or some bad economic news comes in, could cause us to create a bad looking head and shoulders. But the two red candles that we see here also are being marked by some very high volume on the daily. And we've actually noticed that in our charts, is that when you see large red candles or large capitulation sell-offs, we tend to see those as a marking of the possible lows. So this is all the way back to when we saw Liberation Day. Saw that those tended to mark the lows, at least right now. So the narrative for retail happens to be around the AI bubble, how there's a potential recession around the corner. I personally think we're already in recession. But again, we changed the definition of what a recession is. Prices have gone up. We are somewhat in stagflation. And the Fed has some work to do to try to get us out of this bad situation. And right now, the only thing they can do is they can lower interest rates by 25 basis points, help out the labor markets a bit, and then see from there what ends up happening. But we did just kind of start to break out of this downtrend that we have. So we could see 685 next week. I don't think we'll see it Friday. I think we might see a sell-off Friday. We're going to have a little bit of a... I'm going to come back to... Let me show this. We have a gap now that after today. We've got this gap below here. I think we're going to fill that gap and then possibly head up higher. 685 is where I would mark that range. Then we go ahead and test the highs from there. Is 700 possible by the end of the year? I think we're on track for it, to be honest. Media, you have to remember too right now, media is all owned by the same corporations. Like everything is monopoly at this point. Okay, so they're all in each other's pockets. And the moment that they use the media as a tool to influence your emotions to do something with your money. All right? Cuz like we've experienced a lot these last 5 years. Starting in 2020, we all know what happened there. Using the media as a tool to instigate fear in everybody. The last few years, any time that the market, right now the markets are in extreme fear. We basically are seeing it carve out a bottom at this point. That's what's happened, right? CNN. Here, let's even do that too. Let's pull that up for you guys so you guys can see. So CNN, Fear and Greed Index. We're back at an 18 now. Okay. But just earlier in the week, we were down to like 8 or 9. Just because there's so much fear in the markets of what's about to happen in terms of, the stock market, the strength, the price, breadth, the put to call options. There's a lot of puts right now. And usually when you see that many puts, it's actually a sign that we should reverse. Like when everybody's in puts, the markets are actually less likely to crash when it's an expectation. Markets generally will crash in a situation when people don't expect it. All right. So it's there's a lot of dynamics behind these the way that price moves and who's going to be the beneficiary of all of it at the end of the day. All right. So that's my expectation for this next week. Is I think we come back down, probably Friday, we come back down, test 675. And then next week, starting Monday, I think we start to, number one, we probably see the rate cut probability start to get closer to 90 to 100%, and then we start to see this, inch its way back up to retest the highs. It's not going to break it right away, by the way. It's probably going to come back down, top around, and then maybe head higher. And then I would say draw a strong resistance over here at 700. It's not going to shoot right through 700. It's going to bounce around there and do something like this if it is going to go back higher. Yeah. I don't really have too much for you guys. I know because it's a short week, not too much is going on. I actually thought we were going to see a little bit more of a sell-off today. Might be reserved more for Friday. Yeah. A lot of my charts recently have been pretty on point. It's up to you whether or not you want to get into those types of things. I don't generally trade SPY and QQQ on these indices. I've never done too well with trading them, but in terms of my charts, I would say my charts probably 70 to 80% of the time go pretty, like, very close to the lines that I've drawn. Anybody have anything else you want me to go over? We had a small group today. Appreciate you guys all for coming out and listening and seeing what I had to say. I know it wasn't like last few weeks where we had Nvidia earnings and things like that. If you guys are not already a part of STAX or TraderLink, you guys can use the code BF35. It's our Black Friday deal. Gets you 35% off of any sort of our memberships. So whether it is for our Discord, for STAX, for TraderLink, go ahead and sign up. If you sign up for a yearly membership, it saves you even more than just that 35%. Make sure that you guys get in on those while you can, because after this weekend, those will no longer be valid. I would just be careful with IWM near these highs right now. I think it's going to come back to retest this 250, 252 or so. It's looking strong right here. It's looking like it wants to move up higher. So maybe, like I said, Friday come back down, come test a little bit higher, and then move up above as we go into December. So yeah, I definitely think that, I mean, we already saw some rotation into like healthcare, real estate, especially when we saw fear at an all-time high. A lot of money rotated out of tech, but we're also noticing a lot of it starting to come back into it too. There's a crazy stat. Google itself is responsible for almost 20% of the S&P 500's profits this year. Okay, so a big portion of the S&P 500 is weighted toward those big companies. Actually, a lot of smaller companies are all close or near their 52-week lows. And we have to keep that in mind, is that eventually, if there is money being printed, there will be money rotating into a lot of these smaller caps too. So IWM is going to be a beneficiary of it. All right. I don't really have anything else for you guys. Like I said, if you guys want to get in on our Discord and STAX, go ahead and use that code BF35. We'll get you a discount, 35% discount on any of our services. It's a great way for you to get into learning about your analysis and, getting an idea of what's going on with option flow. If you have any questions, you can always email us. That on the screen, help@investorcentralclub.com. I'm there with those emails. The rest of our team is there as well. So if you have any questions, you can always message us. We're always happy to help you guys out. And also, have a great and happy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys are able to spend some time with some loved ones, or if anything, at least finding a way to stuff your face with some good food. I'll be down here in Southern California with my in-laws doing our usual Thanksgiving, and probably trying to avoid some topics on politics, but hey, that's just how it is. All right, love you guys. We'll see you guys. We'll be back on YouTube on next Wednesday. But if you're in our Discord, you guys can continue the conversation in there. Now, let me peek over at this. Wyckoff. An ugly looking chart, but it shows there are some possibilities. So if we are to say that there's a range here, selling climax, not the greatest automatic reaction, but so this name, if they can increase this net margin, dude, you do 1.4 billion in revenue, but your net income is $9 million. Like, that is ridiculous. And annually, yeah, your margins on this name are so bad. They are starting to beat their earnings. At least their EPS is looking better and better. So if they are able to turn that around, yeah, I think we could see above $4 on this name. But I feel Petco, I think a lot of this probably has to do with the fact that, you know, their stores are so big. They have such a large overhead when it comes down to you know, the retail space that they occupy. So if they can fix that and cut those costs, yeah, we probably can see it move up higher. It's looking like it's getting squeezed a little bit. I would say the risk is that it probably comes down toward 3, fills this gap before it heads up higher. But it's going to break this downtrend line sooner or later. And on the other side of it, it's just in this wedge. Okay, that's all I have for you guys today. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. We'll see you guys in the next one, and we'll chat with you guys in the Discord. As always, have a good one. See ya.